The gentle tapping on my truck window pulled me from the deepest sleep I had managed in weeks. Dawn light filtered through the windshield as I blinked away confusion, my neck screaming from another night spent folded into the driver's seat. Through the glass, I saw my grandfather Samuel's weathered face, his expression shifting from curiosity to shock as recognition dawned. I rolled down the window, bracing myself for questions I wasn't ready to answer. "Son, what about the house I gave you? Didn't you like it?" His voice carried genuine concern tinged with bewilderment that cut straight through my carefully constructed defenses. The beautiful two-story home sat just 50 yards away, its wraparound porch and freshly painted shutters mocking my current circumstances. I couldn't meet his eyes, shame burning in my chest as the weight of my situation crashed down once again. I scrambled to find words that wouldn't shatter my grandfather's heart, but before I could speak, the sound of car doors slamming interrupted our moment. My mother, Patricia, emerged from her silver sedan, her perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothes, creating a stark contrast to my rumpled appearance. She approached with that familiar expression of disapproval I had known my entire life, her lips pressed into a thin line that promised uncomfortable truths. "Patricia, thank goodness you're here," Samuel said, relief evident in his voice. "I found Finn sleeping in his truck. Something's wrong with the house situation." My mother's cold laugh sent ice through my veins. "Oh, Samuel, didn't anyone tell you we took it from him and gave it to his sister Emma? She has a family and deserves it more than some divorced man who can't get his life together." The words hit me like physical blows. 6 months ago, everything had seemed so different, so hopeful. My marriage to Jennifer had crumbled after 7 years, not because of infidelity or abuse, but because we had grown into different people with incompatible dreams. She wanted to climb the corporate ladder in Chicago, while I found satisfaction in my construction work here in Pine Ridge. The divorce had been amicable enough, though watching her pack our shared belongings had torn something fundamental inside me. During those dark weeks when I questioned everything about my future, Samuel had surprised me with an incredible gift. He had called me to his kitchen table, spread out legal documents, and pushed a deed across the worn wooden surface. The vacation home he had built with his own hands 40 years ago, the place where I had spent countless childhood summers learning carpentry and fishing in the nearby creek, was now mine. "I've been watching you, Finn," he had said, his blue eyes bright with determination. "You handled your divorce with dignity. You didn't fight dirty, didn't try to take what wasn't yours, even when your lawyer said you could. That's character, son. That's the kind of man who deserves a second chance at happiness." I had been overwhelmed by his generosity, promising to restore the house to its former glory, and maybe even start a family there someday. The 2-bedroom craftsman with its stone fireplace and hardwood floors had felt like salvation, a foundation upon which I could rebuild my shattered confidence. But Patricia had other ideas from the moment she learned about the gift. She appeared at my apartment 3 days later, arms crossed and ready for battle. "Emma and Mark are struggling, Finn. 3 children mounting bills, and Mark's construction company is barely staying afloat. You're single now, you can live anywhere. They need that house more than you do." Emma was my younger sister by 4 years, and I genuinely loved her and her children. Jessica, Kyle, and Danny were bright, energetic kids who deserved stability. When Patricia suggested I let them stay at the house temporarily, while they got back on their feet, it seemed like the right thing to do. I moved into a small apartment across town, paying rent, while my mortgage-free house sat empty of my belongings. "Just until spring," Emma had promised when I handed over the keys. "Mark's got some big contracts coming through and we'll find our own place soon." Spring became summer. Summer became fall. And every conversation about my return to the house was met with tears about the children's school district, Mark's business troubles, or medical bills from Danny's asthma treatments. Patricia orchestrated each guilt trip with surgical precision, painting me as selfish for wanting my own home back while my sister's family struggled. My savings dwindled as months passed. The apartment rent, combined with helping Emma with utilities and groceries, left me with barely enough for basic necessities. When my lease ended last month, I had planned to simply move back into the house. But Patricia's reaction had been explosive. "How dare you throw a family with 3 children onto the street? Your father would be ashamed of the man you've become, thinking only of yourself when your sister needs help." The mention of my deceased father, her favorite weapon in any argument, had stopped me cold. I ended up in a series of cheap motels until my money ran out completely 2 weeks ago. Since then, my pickup truck had served as bedroom closet and sanctuary. Now standing in my grandfather's driveway with the morning sun, highlighting the exhaustion in my face, the full scope of the betrayal became clear. This hadn't been temporary assistance. This had been a calculated transfer of ownership orchestrated by my mother and enabled by my sister's desperate circumstances. "You gave away my house!" Samuel's voice rose with each word, his face flushing red with anger I had never seen before. "Patricia, what have you done?" "I did what needed to be done," she replied smoothly, straightening her shoulders with defiant pride. "Finn has no children, no responsibilities except himself. Emma has 3 babies who need a home. It's simple mathematics, Samuel. The greater good always wins." The casual cruelty in her tone, the way she dismissed my life as expendable, finally broke something inside me that had been bending under pressure for months. I felt tears threatening not of sadness, but of rage at the manipulation, at the way my trust had been weaponized against me. Samuel's hands trembled as he processed what Patricia had revealed. The house he had lovingly built as a young man, the gift he had carefully planned to help his grandson start over, had been stolen through emotional blackmail and family politics. His legacy had been perverted into a tool for manipulation. "That house was meant for Finn," he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. "I chose him specifically because of how he handled his divorce, how he put fairness above revenge. And you turned my gift into some kind of family welfare program." Patricia's mask of righteousness slipped slightly, revealing something uglier underneath. "Your sentimental nonsense doesn't change reality, Samuel. Finn doesn't deserve nice things when he can't even keep a marriage together." The attack on my character felt like acid in an open wound. But watching my grandfather's face crumple with disappointment in his own daughter hurt far worse than any insult Patricia could deliver. Samuel's transformation from hurt grandfather to protective patriarch happened in seconds. His weathered hands, still strong despite his 78 years, pulled his cell phone from his pocket with determination I had rarely witnessed. "Benjamin Walsh, please. This is Samuel Crawford, and I need you immediately." His voice carried authority that made Patricia take an involuntary step backward. "I don't care if it's Saturday morning. This is an emergency." The speakerphone crackled to life, and his longtime attorney's familiar voice filled the morning air. "Samuel, what's going on? You sound upset." "Ben, someone has stolen the Pine Ridge property I deeded to my grandson. I need to know exactly what legal documents were required for that transfer, because I'm looking at a family member who claims they took it from Finn and gave it to his sister." The silence on the other end stretched uncomfortably before Benjamin responded. "Samuel, that's impossible. The deed transfer we prepared 6 months ago requires your signature for any changes in ownership. You're the grantor, and only you can authorize modifications to that property title." Patricia's face went pale, but she rallied quickly. "There must be some mistake. Emma and Mark showed me all the proper paperwork when they took over the house payments." "What house payments?" Benjamin's voice sharpened with legal precision. "Samuel transferred that property free and clear. There are no payments, no mortgage, nothing. And Mrs. Crawford, if someone has been collecting money or signing documents claiming to represent Samuel's interests, that's fraud." My grandfather's blue eyes blazed as he focused on Patricia. "Call Emma and Mark right now. Get them over here. Ben, stay on the line." Patricia's hands shook as she dialed Emma's number, her confidence evaporating with each passing second. When my sister answered, her voice came through clearly on the speaker. "Mom, what's wrong? You sound strange." Emma, honey, I need you and Mark to come to Samuel's house immediately. Bring all the paperwork you have about the Pine Ridge property. What paperwork, Mom? You said everything was handled through your lawyer friend. We never signed anything official because you told us it was just a family arrangement. The truth hit like lightning in the silence that followed. Patricia had orchestrated the entire deception without involving Emma and Mark in the actual fraud, using their desperation and trust to move them into a house they had no legal right to occupy. Mrs. Crawford? Benjamin's voice cut through the tension. I'm going to need to speak with you privately about potential criminal liability. Samuel, I'm calling the sheriff's office to report possible forgery and property fraud. No. Patricia's composure finally cracked completely. This is family business. You can't involve the police in a family matter. Samuel's laugh was bitter and cold. You made it criminal business when you forged documents, Patricia. Ben make those calls. Within minutes, Emma's minivan pulled into the driveway, followed by Mark's work truck. My sister emerged, looking confused and worried, her auburn hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and exhaustion evident in her green eyes. Mark appeared even more distressed, his usually confident demeanor replaced by nervous energy that made him fidget with his keys. What's going on? Emma asked, immediately noticing my disheveled appearance and the tension radiating from our mother. Finn, why do you look like you slept in your truck? Because he did, Samuel said grimly. Emma, your mother told you that you had legal right to the house I gave Finn. What exactly did she show you to prove that? Emma's confusion deepened as she looked between Samuel and Patricia. She said you had changed your mind about giving it to Finn after his divorce, that you wanted it to go to someone who would really appreciate it. She showed us some papers that looked official. What papers? Emma. Benjamin's voice came through the phone speaker. Can you describe them? Mark stepped forward, his face ashen. Mr. Walsh, I work for Meridian Title Company. Patricia brought us documents that looked legitimate, showed Samuel's signature transferring the property to Emma. She said it was a family gift that needed to be processed quietly to avoid tax complications. The admission hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Mark had used his professional position and access to title company resources to process fraudulent documents, unknowingly participating in property theft because he trusted his mother-in-law. Mark. Benjamin's voice was gentle but firm. You're going to need your own attorney. Using company resources to process fraudulent documents is a felony, even if you didn't know they were forged. Emma gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as the full scope of the situation became clear. Mom, what did you do? You told us this was legal. Patricia's defensive anger reached a crescendo as she realized her carefully constructed deception was collapsing. I did what needed to be done for this family. Finn had everything handed to him his whole life, and when he finally faced some adversity, he fell apart. Emma deserved a chance at happiness, and those children needed stability, by lying and stealing. Samuel's voice shook with rage. By destroying trust between siblings and putting Mark's career in jeopardy, by making criminals out of good people. The sound of approaching sirens began to pierce the morning quiet, growing louder as Patricia's face cycled through denial, anger, and finally a strange kind of defiant pride. I regret nothing, she declared, lifting her chin in challenge. This family needed someone strong enough to make hard decisions, and I was the only one willing to do it. Emma's tears began falling as she understood how completely she had been manipulated. Mom, we never asked you to steal from Finn. We just needed help, not this. Jessica, Kyle, and Danny tumbled out of the minivan, drawn by the adult voices and tension they couldn't understand but instinctively feared. 9-year-old Jessica approached cautiously, her dark eyes moving between the adults with the heightened awareness children develop when their world becomes unstable. Grandma Patricia, she said in a small voice. Why is everyone yelling? And why does Uncle Finn look so sad? The innocent question pierced through the legal complexities and adult manipulations, reducing the situation to its emotional core. A child had noticed her uncle's pain, while the adults around her had been too caught up in schemes and justifications to see his suffering. Patricia knelt beside Jessica, her voice softening with genuine affection for her granddaughter. "Sometimes adults have to make difficult choices to protect the people they love, sweetheart. Uncle Finn will be fine." But Jessica's perceptive gaze remained fixed on my face, taking in the exhaustion and hurt I couldn't hide. "He doesn't look fine, Grandma. He looks like he's been crying." The sheriff's patrol car pulled into the driveway just as Benjamin Walsh's voice returned to the speakerphone. "Samuel, I've spoken with the district attorney's office. Given the property values involved and the use of fraudulent documents, we're looking at multiple felony charges. Mrs. Crawford needs to understand the serious legal consequences of her actions." Patricia stood slowly, her face cycling through emotions, as the reality of her situation finally penetrated her defiant facade. The police officer approached our group with professional caution, his hand resting near his radio as he assessed the family drama unfolding before him. "Good morning, folks. I'm Officer Ryan Torres. We received a report of possible property fraud. Who called this in?" Samuel stepped forward, his grandfather's protective instincts overriding everything else. "I did, officer. My daughter has been involved in forging documents to steal a house I gave my grandson. The victims are standing right here, all of them." As Officer Torres began taking statements, and Patricia realized the full weight of legal consequences bearing down on her, I felt something shift inside my chest. For months, I had carried guilt about wanting my own property back, about not being generous enough to sacrifice everything for my sister's family. But watching Jessica's innocent concern for my well-being, seeing Emma's genuine shock at learning the truth, understanding that Mark had been deceived just as completely as I had been, I realized that seeking justice wasn't selfish. It was necessary. Officer Torres proved to be thorough and compassionate as he took statements from each family member. His weathered face and patient demeanor suggested years of experience with domestic situations that had spiraled out of control. As he interviewed Patricia, her story began unraveling in real time. "Mrs. Crawford, you're telling me that you had your daughter's signature notarized without her present, and that you used your son-in-law's access to title company resources without his knowledge of the forgery." Patricia's lawyer-coached responses from television crime shows crumbled under professional questioning. "I was protecting my family's interests. Finn didn't need that house as much as Emma's children did." "Ma'am, that's not how property law works," Torres replied patiently. "You can't redistribute someone else's assets based on your personal judgment of who deserves what." While the adults dealt with legal complexities, I noticed Jessica watching everything with the intense focus children bring to adult crises. She had positioned herself close enough to hear, but far enough to avoid direct involvement, and something in her expression suggested she knew more than anyone realized. "Uncle Finn," she said, quietly approaching me while her parents spoke with Officer Torres. "I heard Grandma Patricia on the phone a lot. She was always talking about money and houses and making sure you never found out about something." My heart stopped. "What kind of things did you hear, sweetheart?" Jessica glanced around nervously, ensuring the adults were occupied. "She told someone on the phone that the house was worth lots of money, and that if they sold it, they could split the money and you would never know. She said you were too stupid to figure it out because you were too sad about your divorce." The revelation hit like a physical blow. This hadn't just been about providing housing for Emma's family. Patricia had been planning to sell my grandfather's gift and profit from the theft, using Emma's desperate circumstances as cover for a calculated financial crime. "Jessica, are you sure about what you heard?" I kept my voice gentle, not wanting to frighten her or make her feel responsible for adult problems. "Uh-huh." She made lots of phone calls when she thought nobody was listening. She also said mean things about you and Aunt Jennifer about how you deserved to lose everything because you couldn't keep a wife happy. Emma had overheard enough of our conversation to join us, her face pale with growing horror. "Jessica, baby, can you tell Mommy exactly what Grandma Patricia said about Uncle Finn?" Jessica looked between us uncertainly, clearly sensing the weight of her words. "She said Uncle Finn was weak and stupid, and that strong people like her had to make decisions for weak people like him. She said you and Daddy were weak too, but that was okay because she was taking care of everything. Emma's tears began flowing freely as she understood the depth of manipulation her mother had employed. We weren't just victims of property theft. We were victims of a systematic campaign of psychological abuse designed to make us doubt our own judgment and worth. Officer Torres had been taking notes throughout Patricia's statement, and when Benjamin Walsh arrived in person 20 minutes later, the legal machinery began moving with frightening efficiency. Benjamin was a tall, silver-haired man in his 60s who had handled Samuel's legal affairs for 3 decades. His presence added gravity to a situation that Patricia had been trying to minimize as a family disagreement. Officer Torres, I've reviewed the file on this property, Benjamin said, spreading documents across the hood of his car. The deed transfer Samuel executed was clear and unambiguous. Any change in ownership would require his signature witnessed and notarized. What we have here appears to be an elaborate fraud scheme involving forged documents and conspiracy. Mark sat heavily on Samuel's porch steps, his head in his hands, as the implications of his unwitting participation became clear. Mr. Walsh, I swear I didn't know the documents were fake. Patricia said Samuel had changed his mind about the gift and wanted everything handled quietly. She seemed so confident, so sure of the legal details. Mark, your company's insurance will likely cover legal representation for you, Benjamin replied kindly. This appears to be a case where you were deceived rather than complicit, but you'll need to cooperate fully with the investigation. As Benjamin and Officer Torres discussed the technical aspects of property fraud, Emma approached Samuel with tears streaming down her face. Grandpa, I'm so sorry. We never meant for this to happen. If I had known Mom was lying and stealing, I would never have moved into that house. Samuel's anger toward Patricia didn't extend to Emma, and his embrace of his granddaughter was fierce with protective love. Emma, sweetheart, you're a victim here too. Your mother used your desperation and love for your children against you. That's not your fault. The sound of additional vehicles arriving drew our attention as news of the morning's events spread through Pine Ridge's tight-knit community. Samuel's neighbor, Helen Morrison, appeared with a casserole and concerned questions. The local Methodist pastor, Reverend David Kim, arrived after Helen called him with worry about Samuel's distress. Samuel, what can we do to help? Reverend Kim asked, taking in the police car and family tensions with pastoral concern. Pray for wisdom and healing, David, Samuel replied wearily. And maybe pray that Patricia comes to her senses before this destroys what's left of our family. But Patricia showed no signs of repentance as Officer Torres continued his investigation. When he discovered additional forged documents in her purse, including a falsified power of attorney claiming authority over Samuel's affairs, her situation became exponentially worse. Mrs. Crawford, I'm placing you under arrest for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Torres announced, producing handcuffs with practiced efficiency. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As Patricia was led to the patrol car, she turned back toward our assembled family, with eyes blazing with unrepentant fury. You'll regret this, Samuel. You'll regret choosing him over your own daughter. Samuel's response was quiet but devastating. I'm not choosing Finn over you, Patricia. I'm choosing honesty over manipulation, justice over theft. You chose your path when you decided to steal from your own son. The patrol car disappeared down the street, taking Patricia toward a booking process that would formally begin her journey through the criminal justice system. Emma collapsed into Mark's arms, overwhelmed by the destruction her mother had wrought in their lives. What are we going to do? She whispered. Where are we going to live? How do we explain this to the children? Jessica, Kyle, and Danny had been watching the adult drama with the silent intensity children bring to family crises. Kyle, age 7, finally spoke up with the directness only children possess. Are we in trouble because Grandma Patricia did something bad? The question hung in the air as Emma struggled to find age-appropriate explanations for adult criminality and family betrayal. How do you tell children that their beloved grandmother is actually a manipulative thief who used their desperation as cover for her schemes? Samuel knelt beside his great-grandchildren, his voice gentle but honest. Your grandma made some very bad choices that hurt people she's supposed to love. That's not your fault, and it doesn't change how much your family loves you. But what about our house? Danny asked, his 5-year-old concern focused on the practical reality of their living situation. The question everyone had been avoiding finally surfaced. Emma and Mark had been living in my house for months, believing they had legal right to be there. Their children had been enrolled in the local school district, had made friends in the neighborhood, had begun to think of the place as home. Even though they were victims of Patricia's deception, their immediate housing crisis remained real and urgent. I looked at my sister's tear-stained face, at my brother-in-law's shame and confusion, at 3 innocent children who were about to lose the stability they thought they had found. The anger I felt toward Patricia for her manipulation was matched by compassion for Emma's family, who had been pawns in a game they never understood they were playing. Emma, I said slowly, you and the kids can stay at the house while we figure this out. This mess isn't your fault, and those children shouldn't suffer because of Patricia's crimes. Samuel's proud smile told me I had chosen correctly, but Emma's fresh tears suggested the complexity of accepting help from someone she had unknowingly wronged. Finn, I can't take charity from you after what happened. It's not right. It's not charity, I replied firmly. It's family taking care of family the right way with honesty and consent instead of lies and theft. As emergency housing arrangements were discussed and legal procedures planned, Jessica approached me one final time before her family prepared to leave. Her small hand slipped into mine as she looked up with the serious expression children wear when delivering important truths. Uncle Finn, I'm glad you're not weak like Grandma Patricia said. Strong people help each other instead of hurting each other. The wisdom in her simple observation provided a foundation of hope amid the wreckage of family trust that Patricia had demolished. Perhaps healing was possible, but only if we built it on truth instead of manipulation, justice instead of theft, love instead of control. The legal battle was just beginning, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was fighting for something worthwhile, rather than simply surviving from day to day. 3 weeks after Patricia's arrest, the ripple effects of her crimes continued expanding through our family and community. She sat in county jail stubbornly refusing the plea deal that would reduce her charges in exchange for full restitution and cooperation. Her public defender, a weary young woman named Sarah Chen, had visited Samuel twice, trying to convince him to encourage Patricia toward accepting responsibility. Mr. Crawford, your daughter is facing 20 to 25 years if this goes to trial, and she's convicted on all counts, Sarah had explained during her second visit. The district attorney has evidence of systematic fraud going back several years, not just the house situation. The revelation that Patricia's criminal behavior extended beyond my stolen house had shaken Samuel to his core. Benjamin Walsh's investigation had uncovered forged documents related to Samuel's investment accounts, falsified insurance claims, and even identity theft involving deceased relatives. Patricia had been running sophisticated financial schemes for years, using family trust and her knowledge of personal information to commit crimes none of us had suspected. Meanwhile, Emma's world had collapsed in ways that went far beyond housing insecurity. Mark's suspension from Meridian Title Company had become permanent termination when the investigation revealed the scope of fraudulent documents processed through his access codes. Even though he had been deceived, the company couldn't risk liability from an employee whose security had been compromised. I've been in title insurance for 15 years, Mark told me as we sat on Samuel's porch, watching his children play in the yard. Clean record, good references, respected in the industry. Now I can't get hired anywhere because Patricia turned me into an unwitting accessory to fraud. The financial pressure on Emma's family had become crushing. Without Mark's income, and with legal bills mounting, they faced bankruptcy in addition to homelessness. Emma had taken a part-time job at the local grocery store, but her wages barely covered gasoline and groceries, much less rent or utilities. Samuel and I had been discussing long-term solutions when my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in 8 months. Jennifer's name on the caller ID made my heart skip in ways I thought I had moved beyond. "Finn, I saw the news story about your family situation. I'm so sorry about what happened to you." Her voice carried the familiar warmth that had initially drawn me to her, but also a new quality of uncertainty that suggested she had reasons for calling beyond simple sympathy. We talked for 45 minutes, a conversation that began with concern for my welfare and gradually moved toward revelations that changed everything I thought I understood about our divorce. Patricia contacted me 3 months before I filed for divorce. Jennifer admitted, her voice heavy with guilt and regret. She said she was worried about you, that you had been drinking heavily and showing signs of anger management problems. She showed me photographs that looked like you passed out drunk, medical records that suggested you had sought treatment for depression, even a police report about a domestic disturbance at our house. The revelation hit like ice water. "Jennifer, I never had any drinking problem. I've never been arrested for domestic violence. Those documents were fake. I know that now," she whispered. After seeing the news about her arrest for forgery, I took everything to a private investigator. The photographs were digitally manipulated. The medical records were completely fabricated. The police report was created using letterhead from a different jurisdiction entirely. The scope of Patricia's manipulation was staggering. She hadn't simply stolen my house. She had systematically destroyed my marriage using sophisticated deception designed to isolate me from the person who loved me most. My divorce, which I had blamed on incompatible life goals and communication failures, had actually been the result of calculated sabotage by my own mother. "Why didn't you talk to me about these concerns?" I asked, struggling to process the betrayal. "She made me promise not to confront you directly. She said addiction and mental health issues made you dangerous when challenged, that she was protecting me by handling the situation quietly. She seemed so knowledgeable about family intervention strategies, so concerned about getting you help." Jennifer's tears were audible through the phone as she continued. "She convinced me that leaving you was the only way to force you to face your problems and seek treatment. She said enabling your behavior by staying would actually harm your recovery chances. The psychological manipulation Patricia had employed was breathtaking in its sophistication. She had used Jennifer's love for me as a weapon against our marriage, convincing her that divorce was actually an act of care rather than abandonment. She had destroyed my relationship using my wife's compassion and concern for my well-being. Finn, I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. I left because I thought staying would hurt you more than leaving. Patricia convinced me that tough love was the only way to save your life." The conversation left me emotionally exhausted, but also strangely hopeful. For months, I had carried guilt about failing as a husband, wondering what I could have done differently to save our marriage. Learning that external manipulation had poisoned our relationship didn't immediately heal the damage, but it provided context that made forgiveness possible for both of us. When Jennifer offered to testify against Patricia and help with Emma's children during the ongoing crisis, I felt something shift in my understanding of what family actually meant. Real family support came through honesty and choice, not manipulation and coercion. "I want to help however I can," Jennifer continued. "And Finn, I want to explore whether we might have a chance to rebuild what Patricia destroyed, if you're open to that possibility." The offer hung between us like a fragile bridge over a chasm of hurt and mistrust. Too much had happened for simple reconciliation, but perhaps healing was possible if we built it on truth instead of the lies that had torn us apart. 2 days later, Jennifer arrived at Samuel's house with homemade cookies for Emma's children and a thick folder of evidence documenting Patricia's manipulation of our marriage. Her presence felt both familiar and strange, like revisiting a favorite place after a long absence to find it changed but still recognizable. Emma's reaction to meeting Jennifer was complicated by guilt, over unknowingly benefiting from the destruction Patricia had caused. "I'm so sorry," she told Jennifer immediately. "I had no idea Mom had been sabotaging your marriage. If I had known, I would never have moved into that house. Emma, you were a victim too," Jennifer replied gently. "Patricia used all of us against each other. The important thing now is healing the damage and making sure she can't hurt anyone else." Jessica, Kyle, and Danny warmed to Jennifer, quickly drawn by her genuine interest in their artwork and school activities. Watching her natural interaction with children, I remembered why I had once imagined building a family with her. Patricia's lies had convinced Jennifer that I was an unstable, dangerous partner, but seeing her comfortable rapport with my nephew and nieces suggested she hadn't lost faith in my character entirely. The growing alliance between Jennifer Emma Samuel and myself created something Patricia hadn't anticipated when she orchestrated her schemes. Instead of dividing us permanently, her crimes had revealed the truth and allowed genuine healing to begin. We were building relationships based on honesty, mutual support, and chosen commitment rather than obligation and manipulation. Benjamin Walsh called that afternoon with updates on the criminal case and a surprising piece of news. "Finn, the district attorney's office, has been investigating Patricia's financial activities for several months independent of your property case. It appears your situation gave them the final evidence they needed for charges they'd been building." The investigation had revealed that Patricia had been stealing from elderly clients at the insurance office, where she worked part-time, using her access to personal information for identity theft and insurance fraud. My stolen house was actually the smallest part of a criminal enterprise that had victimized dozens of families over several years. The good news, Benjamin continued, is that restitution from her other crimes will likely cover Mark's legal expenses and provide some compensation for the damage to his career. The bad news is that her total liability is over $400,000, meaning she'll probably never see the outside of a prison cell again. The finality of Patricia's situation settled over our family like a heavy blanket. She had chosen criminality over honesty, manipulation over love, greed over family loyalty. The consequences would extend far beyond her own life, affecting her children, grandchildren, and every relationship she had poisoned with her deception. That evening, as Jennifer helped Emma prepare dinner while Samuel played chess with Kyle, I experienced something I hadn't felt in months: peace. Not the absence of problems, because we still faced significant challenges, but the presence of genuine human connection built on truth and mutual respect. Emma approached me as we cleaned dishes, her voice quiet with emotion. "Finn, I don't know how to thank you for letting us stay in the house while we figure things out. After everything that happened, your kindness doesn't make sense." "It makes perfect sense," I replied. "Patricia hurt all of us, but we don't have to keep hurting each other. We can choose to be the kind of family she never was." Jessica overheard our conversation and added her own observation with the directness children bring to complex situations. "Uncle Finn, you're like the opposite of Grandma Patricia. She made people feel bad about themselves, but you make people feel good." The contrast was striking and illuminating. Patricia had built her identity around control manipulation and the belief that she was smarter than everyone around her. But her intelligence had been used for destruction rather than creation, leaving a trail of damaged relationships and broken trust. We were choosing a different path, one that required vulnerability and faith in each other's goodness. It was harder than manipulation because it required genuine change rather than simply finding new victims, but it offered the possibility of authentic connection that Patricia's methods could never achieve. As the evening wound down and Jennifer prepared to return to her hotel, she paused at the door with a question that carried weight far beyond its simple words. "Finn, would you be interested in having dinner tomorrow? Just the two of us to talk about everything that happened and see if we might have a foundation for something new." The invitation represented hope and risk in equal measure. Too much damage had been done for simple reconciliation, but perhaps we could build something better, than what Patricia had destroyed, something based on truth and conscious choice rather than naive trust. "I'd like that," I answered, and meant it completely. The legal battle with Patricia would continue for months, but the emotional healing had already begun. We were learning that justice wasn't primarily about punishment, but about creating space for truth and genuine relationship to flourish, where lies and manipulation had once poisoned everything. For the first time since sleeping in my truck, I felt like I had a home again, not because of any building or property, but because I was surrounded by people who chose to love honestly, rather than control destructively. 6 months after Patricia's arrest, her trial finally began in the county courthouse. The delay had been caused by the complexity of charges and the district attorney's decision to combine multiple cases involving Patricia's various victims. What had started as a property dispute had evolved into a comprehensive prosecution of financial crimes spanning nearly a decade. Benjamin Walsh had prepared me extensively for my testimony, but nothing could have readied me for the emotional impact of seeing Patricia in orange prison clothing, sitting between her overwhelmed public defender and a private attorney her sister had hired from 3 states away. "Mr. Crawford," the prosecutor district attorney Margaret Riley began, "please tell the jury about the house your grandfather gave you and what happened to it." I spent 45 minutes detailing the gift, Patricia's manipulation tactics, my months of homelessness, and the discovery of the fraud. But the most powerful moment came when I described finding myself grateful for the experience despite its pain. Losing everything showed me the difference between being broken and being broken open. I testified. Patricia's actions destroyed what I thought was my life, but they also revealed who genuinely cared about my welfare versus who saw me as an obstacle to their plans. The defense attorney, Michael Rodriguez, attempted to portray Patricia's actions as misguided family loyalty rather than criminal intent. "Mr. Crawford, isn't it true that your mother was simply trying to help your sister's family during a difficult financial period?" "Sir, there's a difference between helping family and stealing from family," I replied. Help involves honesty, communication, and respect for everyone involved. What Patricia did involved lies, forged documents, and treating me like my needs and rights didn't matter. The most damaging testimony came from forensic accountant Linda Park, who had spent months unraveling Patricia's financial crimes. Her presentation revealed a pattern of theft and fraud that targeted elderly clients, family members, and anyone who trusted Patricia with access to their personal information. Over the past 8 years, Mrs. Crawford systematically stole approximately $423,000 through various schemes, Park testified. She used her position at Sunset Insurance to access client information for identity theft, forged family members' signatures for property fraud, and even claimed false insurance benefits using deceased relatives' identities. The courtroom gallery was packed with Patricia's victims and their families. Elderly couples who had trusted her to handle their insurance claims only to discover she had stolen their settlements. Co-workers who had provided personal information for work purposes, not knowing she would use it for credit card fraud. Family friends whose deceased relatives' identities she had stolen for elaborate Social Security scams. Emma's testimony was particularly heartbreaking as she described Patricia's manipulation of her desperation to secure housing for her children. "She made me believe that accepting help was the same thing as stealing," Emma said through tears. "She convinced me that Finn didn't deserve kindness because his marriage failed, and that my children's needs justified taking what belonged to him." "Did your mother ever explicitly tell you that the property transfer documents were forged?" the prosecutor asked. "No. She showed me papers that looked official and said everything had been handled properly through lawyers. When I questioned whether Finn had really agreed to give up the house, she told me he was too selfish to care about anyone but himself." Mark's testimony revealed the professional destruction Patricia's schemes had caused beyond our family. "I had 15 years of clean employment history recommendations from supervisors and a reputation for integrity in the title insurance industry," he explained. Even though I was deceived rather than complicit, no company will hire someone whose security access was compromised for fraud, regardless of intent. The most surprising testimony came from Patricia's former supervisor at Sunset Insurance, Janet Williams, who revealed that the company had been investigating Patricia for months before my grandfather filed his police report. We had noticed discrepancies in claim payments and unusual patterns in client account access, Williams testified. Mrs. Crawford was accessing files for clients she wasn't assigned to, often after hours when supervisors weren't present. We were building a case for termination when law enforcement contacted us about the property fraud. When Patricia finally took the stand in her own defense, her testimony revealed the depth of her self-deception and entitlement. She showed no genuine remorse for her actions, instead portraying herself as a victim of family ingratitude and prosecutorial overreach. "I spent my entire adult life sacrificing for my children and grandchildren," she declared from the witness stand. "When I saw opportunities to help Emma's family and teach Finn some responsibility, I took action. I refuse to apologize for putting family first." "Mrs. Crawford," the prosecutor responded, "you forged your father-in-law's signature, stole your son's property, and used your position to commit identity theft against elderly clients. How is any of that putting family first?" Finn needed to learn that life has consequences for poor decisions. His divorce proved he couldn't handle responsibility, so I made better choices for everyone involved. The arrogance and lack of accountability in Patricia's testimony seemed to shock even her own attorneys. She had spent months in jail, but learned nothing about the impact of her actions on other people's lives. Jennifer's testimony about the destruction of our marriage through manufactured evidence proved particularly damaging to Patricia's claims of family loyalty. "Mrs. Crawford didn't destroy their marriage to help anyone," Jennifer stated. "She destroyed it to isolate her son and make him more vulnerable to her control. She used my love for Finn as a weapon against both of us." The defense's closing argument attempted to frame Patricia as a well-meaning mother whose protective instincts had led her astray. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Patricia Crawford is guilty of poor judgment and misguided family loyalty, not the sophisticated criminal enterprise the prosecution has described. But the prosecutor's closing statement focused on the systematic nature of Patricia's crimes and their devastating impact on multiple families. This defendant didn't make mistakes. She made choices. She chose to forge documents, steal identities, and manipulate vulnerable people for financial gain. She chose to destroy relationships and betray trust for personal profit. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts: fraud, forgery, identity theft, conspiracy, and elder abuse. Judge Harrison Miller's sentencing 2 weeks later reflected the severity of Patricia's crimes and her complete lack of remorse. "Mrs. Crawford, you have shown no accountability for your actions and no genuine concern for your victims," Judge Miller stated before imposing sentence. "You used positions of trust to victimize elderly clients, family members, and anyone vulnerable to your manipulation. The court sentences you to 12 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of probation and full restitution to all victims." As Patricia was led away in shackles, she turned toward our family section with eyes blazing with unrepentant fury. "You destroyed our family for money," she called out. "I hope you're satisfied." Samuel's response was quiet, but carried throughout the courtroom. "No, Patricia. You destroyed our family with lies. We're rebuilding it with truth." The months of legal proceedings had been emotionally exhausting, but they had also provided something unexpected clarity about the difference between justice and revenge. I felt no joy in Patricia's imprisonment, only relief that her ability to harm other people had been removed. Outside the courthouse, Emma approached me with tears and words that had been building for months. "Finn, I need you to know that I understand the difference now between helping family and enabling family. What Mom did to you was unforgivable, and I'm committed to spending the rest of my life proving that our family can be better than her worst actions. The healing process would take years, But we had built a foundation of honesty and mutual respect that Patricia's manipulation had never allowed. Emma and Mark were attending counseling to process the trauma of being used as pawns in criminal schemes. The children were in therapy to understand why their beloved grandmother had been taken away and what her actions meant for their family's future. Jennifer and I had been dating cautiously for 3 months, rebuilding trust and exploring whether we could create something better than what Patricia had destroyed. Our relationship was different now, built on conscious choice rather than naive assumption, strengthened by surviving betrayal rather than weakened by it. Mark had found employment with a smaller title company, whose owner valued his experience more than his complicated history. Emma had discovered unexpected artistic talent during the house restoration process, leading to a small business making custom furniture with Samuel's guidance. The house itself had become a symbol of transformation rather than loss. Samuel had decided to officially deed it to both Emma and me, jointly creating shared ownership that reflected our mutual commitment to supporting each other honestly rather than competing destructively. That house was meant to heal our family, Samuel explained during the deed signing ceremony. Patricia tried to turn it into a weapon for division, but you two have made it into a foundation for unity. As we left the courthouse after Patricia's sentencing, Jessica slipped her hand into mine with the unconscious affection children show for trusted adults. "Uncle Finn, are you sad that Grandma Patricia has to go to prison?" The question required honesty about complex emotions that adults often struggle to understand themselves. "I'm sad that she chose to hurt people instead of love people," I replied carefully. "But I'm not sad that she can't hurt anyone else anymore. Will our family be okay without her?" "Jessica, our family is going to be better than okay. We're going to be honest and kind and safe, which we couldn't be when Grandma Patricia was lying and stealing." The little girl nodded with the acceptance children bring to difficult truths when they're presented with love and security. She had lived through the destruction of everything she thought she understood about her family, but she was also experiencing the rebuilding process with adults who prioritized her well-being over their own convenience. 6 months later, Jennifer and I announced our engagement at Thanksgiving dinner in the restored house. Emma and Mark's furniture business was thriving. Samuel's health had improved dramatically since the stress of Patricia's manipulation ended, and the children were flourishing in an environment of stability and truth. The legal victory over Patricia had been important, but the personal victory of choosing love over control, honesty over manipulation, and healing over revenge had transformed all of us into better versions of ourselves than we had been before the crisis began. Justice, we had learned, wasn't primarily about punishment, but about creating space for authentic relationships to grow where toxic ones had once poisoned everything they touched. 1 year after Patricia's sentencing, the transformation in our family felt nothing short of miraculous. The house that had been stolen, recovered, and finally shared had become the center of something none of us had planned, but all of us treasured: a genuine community built on choice rather than obligation, honesty rather than manipulation. Emma's furniture restoration business had grown beyond anything she had imagined possible. What began as therapy learning to sand and refinish damaged pieces during the house renovation had evolved into Second Chances Woodworking, a small company specializing in bringing abandoned furniture back to life. Samuel's 60 years of carpentry knowledge combined with Emma's artistic vision created pieces that local interior designers competed to purchase. "I never knew I was creative," Emma told me as we watched her latest commission being loaded into a customer's truck. "Mom always said I was too practical for artistic nonsense, that I should focus on finding a man to take care of me instead of wasting time on hobbies." The customer was paying $1,200 for a dining room table Emma had rescued from a garage sale for $25. Her confidence had grown alongside her skills, and the woman who once believed she deserved only charity was now running a business that employed 2 part-time assistants and had a waiting list of eager customers. Mark's recovery from gambling addiction and career destruction had been slower but equally profound. The new title company had promoted him to senior processor after recognizing his exceptional attention to detail and knowledge of fraud prevention. His experience as Patricia's victim had given him unique insight into document forgery techniques, making him invaluable for training other employees to recognize suspicious paperwork. I understand now that Patricia targeted me specifically because my addiction made me vulnerable. Mark explained during one of our regular Saturday morning conversations. She knew I was desperate enough to accept suspicious documents without asking the right questions. Recovery isn't just about not gambling. It's about not letting desperation make me an easy target for manipulation. The children had adapted to their new reality with the resilience kids display when adults provide consistent love and honesty. Jessica, now 10, had become fiercely protective of family truth-telling, calling out any adult who tried to sugarcoat difficult realities or avoid uncomfortable conversations. "Uncle Finn, are you and Aunt Jennifer going to get married and have babies?" she asked during our weekly chess game, her directness catching me off guard. "We're engaged, so yes to the marriage part. The baby part depends on what Jennifer wants and whether we can be good parents. You'll be good parents because you don't lie to kids about important things. Grandma Patricia used to lie about everything, even when the truth would have been easier." Kyle had thrown himself into baseball with an intensity that worried us initially, until we realized he was using sports as a healthy outlet for processing family trauma. His coach mentioned that Kyle was the most coachable player he had seen in 20 years of youth athletics, eager to learn from mistakes, rather than defensive about criticism. "Coach says I'm good at listening to advice and changing what doesn't work," Kyle told me proudly after a game where he had successfully adjusted his batting stance mid-game. "That's because Uncle Finn taught me that smart people change their minds when they get new information." Danny, now 6, had become Samuel's constant shadow, following his great-grandfather around the workshop, with the focused attention children bring to beloved adults. Samuel's patience in teaching woodworking basics to a kindergartner had been therapeutic for both of them. "Great-grandpa, why did Grandma Patricia get so angry when people told her she was wrong?" Danny asked during one of their afternoon projects. Samuel's response reflected wisdom earned through painful experience. "Some people think admitting mistakes makes them weak, Danny. But really, admitting mistakes is how strong people become stronger. Your grandma never learned that lesson." Jennifer's integration into our reconstructed family had been gradual but authentic. Her relationship with Emma had evolved from awkward apology to genuine friendship, bonded by shared experience of Patricia's manipulation. They had started a monthly book club that included several neighborhood women creating social connections. Neither had prioritized during their previous focus on survival. "I forgot how much I enjoyed having female friends," Jennifer told me as we prepared dinner for one of their book club meetings. Patricia had convinced me that Emma resented my education and career success, that family relationships were naturally competitive rather than supportive. The book club conversations had become therapeutic sessions where women shared experiences of manipulation, gaslighting, and recovery. Several members had dealt with controlling mothers, abusive partners, or toxic work environments. Their discussions revealed patterns of behavior that helped everyone recognize manipulation tactics before becoming victims. Patricia wasn't uniquely evil, Jennifer observed after a particularly intense book club discussion. She was an extreme example of controlling behavior that many people experience in smaller doses. Learning to identify those patterns helps protect us from future manipulation. My construction business had benefited unexpectedly from the media attention surrounding Patricia's trial. Local news coverage of the family fraud case had portrayed me sympathetically, leading to numerous calls from potential customers who wanted to support someone who had overcome difficult circumstances through honest work. Finn Crawford Restoration now specialized in helping families renovate properties with emotional significance, inherited homes, divorce properties, houses recovering from damage or neglect. The combination of construction skills and understanding of trauma had created a niche market I never knew existed. You understand why these projects matter to people, my customer Helen Morrison explained as we finished restoring the kitchen in her late mother's house. This isn't just about new cabinets and paint. It's about healing old wounds and creating new memories. The most surprising development had been Samuel's renewed energy and health. At 79, he was more active and engaged than he had been in years, freed from the constant stress of Patricia's drama and manipulation. His weekly chess games with Kyle, daily workshop time with Danny, and frequent dinners with our extended chosen family had given him purpose and joy. I wasted too many years trying to manage Patricia's emotions and fix her relationships, Samuel told me, as we worked together on a custom bookshelf for Jennifer's home office. I thought family loyalty meant enabling her bad behavior instead of holding her accountable for change. The bookshelf project had special significance because it represented Jennifer's decision to move back to Pine Ridge permanently. Her Chicago marketing firm had allowed her to work remotely, and she had found unexpected satisfaction in the slower pace of small-town life. I thought I needed the energy and competition of the big city, she explained, as we measured her growing collection of books. But what I actually needed was authentic relationships and meaningful work. Chicago gave me career advancement. Pine Ridge gives me life fulfillment. Our wedding planning had been collaborative and intentional, reflecting our commitment to building something genuine rather than recreating what Patricia had destroyed. We had chosen a small ceremony at the restored house with Samuel officiating, using temporary authority granted by the county clerk. This house has seen the worst and best of our family, Samuel had said when we asked him to perform the ceremony. It's the perfect place to make promises about choosing love over control, honesty over manipulation, healing over revenge. Emma had offered to cater the reception using recipes from Samuel's late wife, creating connections between generations that Patricia's chaos had obscured. Mark was handling logistics with the attention to detail his title company experience had developed. The children were planning special performances, Jessica's poetry reading Kyle's baseball demonstration, and Danny's woodworking show and tell. The wedding invitation list reflected our chosen family philosophy. Patricia's absence felt notable, but not tragic. Her sister and brother had declined to attend, unable to separate supporting us from betraying her. But friends, neighbors, co-workers, and extended family who had supported us through the crisis would be present to celebrate our commitment to building something beautiful from the ruins of what manipulation had destroyed. Jennifer's pregnancy announcement 3 weeks before the wedding had been the final piece of healing we hadn't known we were waiting for. After years of believing I was too damaged for family happiness, the prospect of raising children in an environment of honesty and love felt like the ultimate victory over Patricia's toxic legacy. This baby will grow up knowing that family means people who choose to love you honestly, Jennifer said, as we shared the news with Samuel and Emma's family. No manipulation, no control games, no lies disguised as protection. Jessica's response to the pregnancy news encapsulated the wisdom children develop when they survive family trauma with good adult support. Aunt Jennifer, you and Uncle Finn will teach the baby how to be strong without being mean, which is something Grandma Patricia never learned. As we approached our wedding day, I reflected on the journey from sleeping in my truck to planning a future with someone who truly knew and chose me. Patricia's crimes had destroyed what I thought was my life, but they had also revealed possibilities for authentic relationship that her manipulation had made impossible. The house she had stolen had become the foundation for genuine community. The marriage she had destroyed had been rebuilt on truth rather than assumption. The family relationships she had poisoned with competition and control had been replaced by mutual support and respect. Justice, we had learned, wasn't just about punishment for wrongdoing, but about creating space for love to flourish, where toxicity had once prevented authentic connection. Patricia was serving her 12-year sentence, but we were living our lives as free people who had chosen healing over hatred, truth over manipulation, love over control. The wedding would be a celebration not just of Jennifer's and my commitment to each other, but of our entire family's commitment to building relationships based on choice, rather than obligation, honesty, rather than deception, healing rather than harm. 3 days before the ceremony, Emma found me sitting on the porch where this entire journey had begun, remembering the morning Samuel discovered me sleeping in my truck. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Mom had just been honest about wanting to help our family?" Emma asked, settling beside me with 2 cups of coffee. "I think honest help would have looked completely different," I replied. "She would have talked to all of us together, acknowledged everyone's needs, found solutions that didn't require lies or theft. But that would have meant giving up control, and control was more important to her than anyone's actual happiness." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I'm grateful for how everything worked out, but I still grieve the mother I thought I had. It's hard to accept that someone you loved was never actually the person you believed them to be. The love was real, even if the person wasn't who we thought I offered. We can miss the relationship we thought we had while still protecting ourselves from the reality of who she actually was." As the sun set behind the trees Samuel had planted 40 years ago, I felt profound gratitude for the journey that had brought us to this point. The sleeping in my truck had been necessary to wake me up to Patricia's manipulation. The theft of my house had been necessary to reveal the depth of her deception. The destruction of my marriage had been necessary to understand the difference between love and control. Everything painful had been transformed into something meaningful through our choice to respond with healing rather than hatred, truth rather than retaliation, love rather than the manipulation that had caused so much damage. In 3 days, Jennifer and I would promise to build our marriage on the foundation of honesty and mutual respect that surviving Patricia's crimes had taught us to value above everything else. The house that had been stolen and recovered would host a celebration of love that transcended blood ties and legal obligations, creating chosen family bonds stronger than anything manipulation could destroy. 2 years after that morning when Samuel found me sleeping in my truck, our wedding day dawned with the kind of perfect autumn weather that feels like a blessing. The house stood ready for celebration, its restoration complete not just physically, but spiritually transformed from a symbol of theft into a foundation for chosen family love. Jennifer looked radiant in the simple white dress she had chosen her pregnancy, just beginning to show as a gentle curve that spoke of new life growing from the ashes of old pain. As Samuel prepared to officiate our ceremony, I felt overwhelmed by the journey that had brought us to this moment of pure joy. Finn and Jennifer. Samuel began, his voice strong despite his 80 years. "You have traveled through darkness to reach this light. Your love has been tested by manipulation, betrayed by lies, and nearly destroyed by forces beyond your control. But you have chosen to rebuild on truth rather than assumption, forgiveness rather than bitterness, hope rather than fear." The small gathering included everyone who mattered: Emma's family, Jennifer's parents, who had flown in from California, neighbors who had supported us through the crisis, co-workers who had become friends, and several members of Jennifer's book club who had become chosen sisters in healing. Emma's catering was flawless, but more importantly, it represented her transformation from victim to entrepreneur, from someone who believed she deserved only charity to a woman building her own success through talent and determination. Mark's logistics management reflected his growth from desperate gambler to responsible family man who understood the value of honest work and genuine relationships. The children's performances were perfection. Jessica's poetry, reading about families that choose love instead of lies, brought tears to every adult present. Kyle demonstrated the batting techniques he had learned through patient practice and honest feedback from coaches who cared about his growth, rather than their own egos. Danny presented a small wooden jewelry box he had crafted with Samuel's guidance, explaining each step of the process with 6-year-old precision. The most unexpected moment came during the reception, when the mail carrier arrived with a special delivery letter addressed to Samuel. The return address showed the state correctional facility where Patricia was serving her sentence. "Should I read it now or wait until after the celebration?" Samuel asked, holding the envelope with hands that trembled slightly. "Read it now," Jennifer encouraged gently. "Whatever it says, we're all here together to handle it." Samuel opened the letter carefully and read silently for several minutes, his expression cycling through surprised sadness, and finally something approaching peace. "She's written an apology," he announced to our gathering. "A real one, not the manipulative kind she used to offer when she got caught doing something wrong." He cleared his throat and began reading Patricia's words aloud. "So, Dad, I know I have no right to contact you on Finn's wedding day, but I needed you to know that prison has given me time to understand what I really did to our family. I destroyed trust, stole from people I claimed to love, and used everyone's desperation and kindness against them. I told myself I was helping, but I was really just controlling everyone because I couldn't control my own fears and failures. I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't deserve contact with the grandchildren whose lives I damaged with my selfishness. But I want you to know that I understand now why you chose justice over enabling my behavior. You tried for years to help me change, and I responded by becoming more manipulative and destructive. Please tell Finn that his mother is proud of the man he became, despite having me as an example of how not to love people. Tell Emma that her strength in choosing truth over loyalty to me shows the kind of mother she is, and the kind of woman I never learned to be. Tell Jennifer that I'm sorry I stole years of happiness from both of them with my lies, and that I hope their new marriage will be everything their first one could have been without my interference. I'm not asking for visits or letters or inclusion in your lives. I'm asking for the chance to spend my remaining years becoming the kind of person who would have deserved your love, instead of demanding it through manipulation and guilt. I love you all more than I ever knew how to show, and I'm sorry it took losing everything to learn what love actually means. Patricia!" The silence that followed was profound and complicated. Patricia's letter showed genuine accountability for perhaps the first time in her adult life, but it also raised questions about forgiveness, second chances, and the difference between understanding someone's pain and trusting them with your vulnerability again. "She sounds different," Emma said quietly. "Less defensive, more honest about what she actually did and why it was wrong. Prison has a way of forcing people to face reality when they can't manipulate their environment anymore," Samuel replied. "Whether this change is permanent or just another strategy remains to be seen." Jennifer took my hand as we processed Patricia's words together. "I'm glad she's taking responsibility, but I'm also glad she understands that accountability doesn't automatically restore relationship. Some damage is too deep for simple apology to heal." I felt a complex mix of emotions reading my mother's first honest communication in years. Relief that she finally understood the impact of her actions, sadness for all the years wasted on manipulation instead of love and wariness about whether this insight would last beyond her current circumstances. "I appreciate her taking responsibility," I said finally. "But I'm not ready for contact, and I may never be. Understanding why someone hurt you doesn't obligate you to welcome them back into your life." Samuel nodded with the wisdom of someone who had spent years trying to fix a daughter who didn't want to change. "Forgiveness and reconciliation are different things, Finn. We can forgive her impact on our lives without inviting her back into our future." The conversation about Patricia's letter naturally evolved into discussion of the life lessons our entire ordeal had taught us. Emma spoke about learning the difference between helping and enabling, between loyalty and complicity, between supporting family and sacrificing yourself for their poor choices. Mark shared his insights about vulnerability and addiction, about how desperation makes people easy targets for manipulation, about the importance of honest accountability in recovery from any kind of destructive behavior. Samuel reflected on the difference between loving someone and enabling their harmful patterns, between family loyalty and family toxicity, between trying to control other people's choices and supporting their growth. Jennifer and I talked about rebuilding trust after betrayal, about the difference between love and control, about choosing relationships based on who people actually are rather than who we hope they might become. As the evening celebration continued, I found myself amazed by the transformation in everyone present. Emma had grown from desperate victim to confident entrepreneur. Mark had evolved from addictive gambler to responsible provider. Samuel had changed from enabler to healthy boundary setter. Jennifer had moved from manipulation victim to discerning partner. The children had developed from trauma survivors to resilient young people with strong foundations for healthy relationships. And I had transformed from homeless broken man sleeping in his truck to someone capable of building authentic relationships based on mutual respect and honest communication. The house itself represented this transformation. What began as a symbol of theft and family betrayal had become the foundation for chosen family love. The rooms that had housed deception now sheltered truth-telling. The kitchen where lies had been planned now served meals prepared with genuine care. The porch where Patricia had revealed her crimes now hosted celebrations of healing and growth. As our wedding guests prepared to leave, Jessica approached Jennifer and me with the serious expression she wore when delivering important observations. "Aunt Jennifer, Uncle Finn, I'm glad you waited until after all the bad stuff to get married again. Now you know how to choose each other for real, instead of just hoping everything will work out." Her comment encapsulated something profound about second chances and the difference between naive hope and informed choice. Jennifer and I weren't recreating our first marriage. We were building something entirely new based on who we had become through surviving betrayal and choosing healing. "You're right, Jessica," Jennifer replied. "Sometimes you have to lose something to understand what it's really worth and how to protect it properly." As the last guests departed and we began cleaning up from the celebration, I reflected on the complete transformation of my circumstances. 2 years ago, I had been homeless, broken, convinced I was a failure at relationships and family loyalty. Tonight I was married to someone who truly knew and chose me, surrounded by family relationships built on honesty and mutual support, living in a home that represented victory over manipulation and control. The baby Jennifer and I were expecting would grow up in an environment none of us had experienced as children. Complete honesty about difficult realities, unconditional love, without manipulation, support, without enabling boundaries, without rejection. Patricia's crimes had inadvertently given us the opportunity to break generational patterns of dysfunction and create something healthier for future generations. "Finn," Samuel said, as we finished putting away chairs and tables, "I want you to know that watching you choose healing over hatred, justice over revenge, love over control, has been the greatest pride of my life. You took the worst thing that ever happened to our family and used it to create the best thing that ever happened to our family." His words carried the weight of recognition from someone whose respect I had always craved, but never known how to earn. I had spent years trying to please Patricia through compliance and accommodation, never understanding that her approval was conditional on my willingness to be controlled. Samuel's approval came from witnessing my character in crisis, my choices under pressure, my commitment to building something better than what manipulation had destroyed. As Jennifer and I prepared for bed in the house where our journey toward authentic love had begun, I felt profound gratitude for every painful step that had brought us to this moment of pure happiness. "Do you think we would have made it if Patricia hadn't forced us to face the truth about manipulation and control?" Jennifer asked, as we settled into our shared future. "I think we would have stayed together but never been as happy as we are now," I replied honestly. Her lies forced us to learn the difference between love and manipulation, between supporting each other and controlling each other. We're building something stronger than what existed before because we understand what real love actually requires. 3 months later, Jennifer gave birth to our daughter, Sarah Elizabeth, named for Samuel and for new beginnings. As I held my daughter for the first time, I made silent promises about the kind of father I would become, honest about difficult realities, unconditionally loving, without being manipulative, supportive without being controlling. Sarah would grow up knowing that family meant people who chose to love honestly, that trust was earned through consistent character, rather than demanded through guilt or obligation, that real strength came from admitting mistakes and growing from them rather than defending poor choices through manipulation. Patricia remained in prison with 7 more years left on her sentence. Whether her newfound accountability would last remained unknown, but our family's healing didn't depend on her transformation. We had learned to build relationships based on who people actually were, rather than who we hoped they might become. The house continued to serve as a symbol of chosen family love. Emma's furniture business had expanded to include custom pieces for other families, rebuilding from trauma. Mark's expertise in fraud prevention had led to consulting opportunities that helped protect other families from financial manipulation. Samuel's workshop had become a gathering place where children learned that adults could be trusted to tell the truth and keep their promises. Justice, we had learned, wasn't primarily about punishment, but about creating space for authentic love to flourish, where manipulation had once poisoned everything. Patricia's crimes had inadvertently given us the greatest gift possible, the opportunity to learn what family relationships looked like when built on choice, rather than obligation, honesty rather than control, love rather than manipulation. As I rocked my daughter to sleep in the house where I had once been homeless, I reflected on the complete transformation that began with sleeping in my truck and ended with building a family based on truth, respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what truly matters. Sometimes betrayal is necessary to understand the difference between love and control. Sometimes justice is less about punishment and more about protection, less about revenge, and more about creating space for healing. Patricia's 12-year sentence would eventually end, but the family we had built from the ruins of her manipulation would last for generations. We had chosen love over control, truth over lies, healing over hatred. And that choice had made all the difference. I want to ask you something important. Have you ever experienced manipulation from someone you trusted? And how did you find the strength to choose healing over revenge? Your story could help others who are facing similar challenges with toxic family members or controlling relationships. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of your own journey through family betrayal, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need hope that healing is possible even after the deepest betrayal. Subscribe to hear more stories about choosing love over manipulation and building authentic relationships from the ashes of toxic ones. Thank you for listening to this story of transformation and for being part of a community that believes families should be built on love rather than control. Remember that you deserve relationships based on honesty, respect, and genuine care, not manipulation disguised as love. Until next time, choose truth over lies, healing over hatred, and love over control. Your future self will thank you for the courage to build something beautiful from whatever ruins life may have handed you.